How's it going, man?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm great, and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us a little bit. I want to talk about, obviously, Houston Cougar football. I'm lucky enough I'll be calling that game on next Thursday night when they take on Stephen F. Austin. But I got to talk about your career and take off your humility hat right now, because I know you are a humble guy. How much money, NIL money, is David Klinger demanding in 2025? I mean, we got to talk about some major dough.
Oh, boy, the state of college football is in total disarray. I was just looking at the University of Houston roster, and the guys coming from all over. I remember the reason I went back for my senior year was because we made an agreement that they paid for my school, and I agreed to play for that school. For 4 or 5 years, whichever it may be, and I got a great education there, and it has set me up well for life. And I think that we've just totally lost that whole concept. I don't care how good you are; you can be the greatest to ever play the game. Deion Sanders is not playing football anymore. Those days will come to an end, and then you've got to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. And I just think we've lost sight of what education is and what being a student athlete is. The truth of the matter is, I don't know that they're students anymore. They're just athletes going from place to place, and let's just call it what it is.
Well, one of my biggest bummers associated to what we're talking about right now is I don't think, and as a young man myself, I certainly, like if there was NIL when I was playing, I would have bounced all over. I'm sure I would have, unless I was really guided correctly by, mentor or my parents. But you see now they're not getting the opportunity to form those great bonds with teammates like you got to do. And they're also not getting the experience of, okay, I've got to work through this adversity. I've got to walk through this and become calloused.
Yeah, and those are huge sacrifices for our culture. There used to be places in our culture where you learned discipline, sacrifice, attention to detail, how to play with the team, how to overcome, how to succeed after you fail. Our kids aren't learning that. They just, your dad takes you and you go play for another team, or you pout and take your ball and go home, or and so if we're not learning those life skills, really, literally anywhere in our culture, how does that impact our culture?
Yes.
And I think we're in big trouble there.
No, and it's something you're not going to see the outcome tomorrow, but you'll see it right in 5-10 years. Let's turn back the clock and jump in the time machine ourselves. When I was younger, I remember so well seeing you splashed across the cover of Sports Illustrated. That was the biggest deal for someone of my age group, right? And you were really, like, the numbers you put up were just mind-numbing. And as a quarterback, you were just so amazing. How did you handle all the attention that came with somebody putting up such huge numbers in one of the biggest sports known to man?
I think I had a pretty good perspective on reality. I knew that I had athletic ability. I mean, I jumped 6'9", I think, when I was a freshman in high school, and I could throw the ball a long way. None of that matters if you don't have a team around you, if you don't have a great system. And so I went to University of Houston. I chose University of Houston because they offered me scholarships in basketball and football. I could have gone just about anywhere to play basketball, but Jack Capardi and John Jenkins and that offense, and I came from a wishbone offense. In high school, we ran the wishbone. The only time the ball was in the air was on the option pitch, and we were horrible. I mean, we were not very good. And I was actually offered a scholarship because I overthrew a receiver on we called it veer pass, 23 veer pass. I overthrew him by about 35 yards, and I remember John Jenkins saying, "Well, I don't know if he can throw it to anybody, but he can sure throw it a long way." And so you come in, you start to work hard. I was pushed by the other players around me. Andre Ware, we're still great friends today. It was a unique relationship. It was adversarial in that we competed against each other, but at the end of the day, we pulled for each other. And I was his biggest advocate. He was my biggest advocate. And it just there was teamwork, there was system, and if you just did your part in the system, then good things happened. And so I realized that that's what was going on. It wasn't, David Klinger, the superstar who walked in there like Superman Clark Kent, took off his, outer robe and exposed his S on his chest and made it all. That wasn't what was going on. My senior year, we had a great offensive line my junior year. My senior year, many of those guys were gone. And all of a sudden, you start to look pretty common, and it was the same receivers, the same quarterback, but the offensive line had changed. And so this is a team game. And back to what we were saying before, this is, I think, what we're losing in college sports today.
When you were, orchestrating that run and shoot, you were the signal caller. And it was something we really had never seen before. Did you know you were on the forefront of a changing of the guard as far as how offenses tried to move the football and score points?
Oh, yeah. And you remember back in the day, it was I formation, and it was a lot of power football. In the NFL, it was the hogs. It was the age of the 330-pound linemen and the 260-pound middle linebackers and safeties that were 230 pounds. And we came in, and by the end of the first quarter, these big run stopping players were standing on the sideline with leg cramps,
Yeah.
We played A&M, and when we played A&M, they gave us some problems because they could match us up athlete for athlete. But they had 4 first-round draft picks at cornerback, 2 first-round draft picks at safety. They took out all their defensive linemen. They left the nose tackle, and they just played with athletes, and it was athlete against athlete. And so we knew that we were changing some things. And in many ways, what we were doing back then still, particularly with John Jenkins, not so much the run and shoot, but John Jenkins, I say there's innovators and there's imitators. He really knew what was behind the run and shoot, quote, offense, which was really just option route, right? It was options. Receivers could go anywhere on any play. There was a design to it, a reason, but I don't think teams have caught up even yet to what we were doing years ago.
When you get drafted, first round pick, a lot of excitement. What surprised you about going to the NFL? I mean, I know you won't say it, but that's not the best organization or entry point into the league to play for the Bengals back in that time. So what surprised you about the transition to big time football? I got to ask you that before I ask you about Willie Fritz and today's teams.
To give you a perfect example, they're installing the offense, and they draw up a play that's their base pass play, and it's outside receivers running a curl, and inside receivers, the backs running the flat, and the tight end running the hook over the ball, and that was it. It was just locked in. That's what you run, And I remember asking, well, what happens if they play cover 2? Well, then you throw it away. And I'm going, what in the world are we doing? This is like going from, nuclear science or rocket science back to second grade addition. What on earth? And so I said, look, the corners are going to force you inside, take an inside release, run a bench route, send the tight end down the middle, hey, with 3-on-2, and they're looking at me like I'm from another planet. I'm in big trouble here. And so Boomer Esiason, who I love to death, he was so good to me, but I just asked him, I said, help me out. Tell me what this offense is. He says, it's run, pass, sit on the bench. Run, pass, sit on the
bench. He's never been one to hold back. That's a pretty cool story.
Some other things were happening. The Anthony Munoz, is all the great players that had been with the Bengals were retiring, and there was a huge roster turnover.
Were you Sam White or Bruce Coslett?
No, I was Dave Shula.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so Dave Shula, but Paul Brown had just passed away. Mike Brown had taken over the team. I think there was a heritage tax issue. So the year that the salary cap came into the league, there also was a salary basement, and I think the basement was $32 million. Well, we had to double our salary to get to the basement. And we look back and think, well, there was we won 3 games, and you think, well, how on earth did we pull off winning 3 games with what we had? And but very quickly, not only I had arm surgery. I hurt my arm after elbow surgery and all kinds of stuff. So my career was over really before I'd even started there. And so I really would have loved to have played in the game today. It's much more akin to what we were doing in college than back then. It was, play action pass and handoff and I formation and predetermined routes and, punt for field position. Punt for field, what are we talking about? That's something we never talked about that in college. It was, 4th and 30. Should we go for it or not? Let's go for it.
It was like a futuristic scheme and attack you had. And it really was amazing to watch. Now, present day, to the Houston Cougars and Willie Fritz. I know you have a pretty good feel for the program. Willie Fritz, in his second year, wherever he's gone, has done very well. What kind of fingerprints has he put on this Houston program so far, on the field and culture-wise?
It wouldn't shock me if they do well, because his DNA is a discipline, attention to detail, character, and those things translate into success in life. I mean, the world is wired for that to be successful, right? So he's going to have some level of success. The question is, and what's different, I think, for all football programs now and all sports programs, college programs across the country, is what we've been talking about. It's how do you bring in people from all over, different cultures, disgruntled people who I'm upset, I deserve to play, I'm coming here, and you have this kind of I deserve attitude, and put them together and bring them into a different culture, change their mindset, put a team together. That's a challenge, and I hope he can do it.
What do you think it means to the program, that brand new football facility they have? Last year they're going practice field, then you got to walk to the locker room on game day. You're walking to the field. It's just everything was all spread out. Now they got one place, where everything is kind of like a nerve center, and it's beautiful, right? State of the art, and the stadium is beautiful too. Like, how much does that mean to the program?
Let me show you how old school I am. Who cares? Who cares? Look, when I was at U of H, our weight room was a joke. It was 40, but it didn't matter. Look, we would have played University of Texas or Texas A&M or Arkansas on broken glass in the parking lot in a doubleheader, right? It doesn't matter. None of that stuff matters. The field is the exact same size. It takes discipline. When the game starts, when the whistle blows, it doesn't matter how nice your stadium is, how many weight racks you have in your weight room, how many mirrors you have. None of that matters. It comes down to the guy to your right and to your left, and the coaching staff. And are you going to succeed or fail? And so I throw all that stuff in the trash can. There's always someone who has better stuff, but you don't win because you have nice stuff. Show me how that translates into wins. Maybe you can get better recruits, right? But talent does not equate to a football player. It just doesn't. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't reach it, then what's the point? Show me the guy who's just the hardworking plodder, and give me a bunch of those guys together, and we'll clean your 5-star clock, right? and so I couldn't care less. If they're going to play out there in the parking lot under the Walmart lights, that's fine, right? Let's play. Right?
What was the strangest place you guys ever did like a walkthrough or a practice with Coach Pardee before a game?
Pardee, remember Coach Pardee was a Junction boy from A&M. He was back with the Bear Bryant and all that stuff. And so we had early morning practices, and we would bring 2 pair of shoes to practice. Our first pair of shoes was sneakers, our basketball shoes, and we would go to the parking lot over by the old stadium, because we didn't have lights in our practice facility. And so we'd go practice in the parking lot until the sun came up, and then we'd take a break, and you'd put on your cleats and you go over and practice on the grass. Look, but that kind of mentality, it doesn't matter where we're practicing, right? We'll practice over there in the third ward, and with gunshots going off, you better stay low or you'll get shot,
But let's win, right? Let's build and let's win together. Yeah. And it kind of builds the bonds too.
Well, and I don't want anybody on my team that's not tough enough to endure that.
Yeah.
If you want to complain about, I can't see myself in the mirror when I'm working out in the weight room, I don't want you on my team.
What do you think? What kind of pressure or what kind of situation? Because I got to bring the stars back out now. You got a 5-star quarterback, right? The bells and whistles, Connor Wegman under center next Thursday. What are your expectations for him taking over this program?
Look, it always and ultimately comes down to performance, and I can't think of another position in sports where for you to do your job, everyone else has to do their job first, right? And so many times the quarterbacks get too much credit and too much blame. If the line doesn't block, the quarterback looks bad. If the back goes the wrong way, the quarterback looks bad. If the receivers run the wrong route, the quarterback. If the coach calls the wrong play, if we're not in the right situation, not in the right personnel. So there's a lot to manage at quarterback. But the thing that seems to be most unspoken is he a leader? Is he a leader of men? Will they play for him? And so that remains. I watched him at A&M. I liked him. I really liked him. But now you've got to come to get a new group of guys to rally around you, and then they've got to play. And so it's hard to say how will he do. He will do as well as the team does.
I didn't. It's unfair for me to say, he was in a dysfunctional situation at A&M, but he had a bunch of different coordinators, right? Play callers. He dealt with a lot of injuries. As the guy who is the focal point, you mentioned all the pressures that come with being the quarterback. Where do you think his headspace is entering this season? Or where should it be for him to have success? When I went to the NFL, I think I was 6 years and 6 different coordinators, and that's hard. It is hard to go from system to system. There's a difference between knowing what to do and playing. Playing is knowing what to do is so ingrained in you that you could jump out of bed at 3 a.m. and run the play. My 2 boys, Luke and James, they're high school coaches, and they're putting in our offense we ran in college, and Luke ran it. He's my oldest. He ran it in junior college, and so they said, hey, Dad, go down there and run the offensive line, and call it. Man, I could jump out of bed at 3 a.m. I guarantee you, Jason Phillips and Manny Hazard and Chuck Witherspoon and Mike Geisler and all those guys we had, it was so ingrained in us. I promise you. If I said, black 66 even, boy, they could run it, and that's what you don't get when you go from program to program. So he's learning new nomenclature, new system, new people, new culture, playing with different people. If he has success, that's wonderful. But all of this takes time. Anything that's worth building takes some time, and it's not going to be built overnight. So stay the course. Look, they're going to play the third. It's the first game. A lot of new faces. I was telling my sons this last week. It's never as good as you think. You go out there, and if they win 60-0, I promise you, when they watch the film the next day, it's not going to be as good as they thought. And if it's a close game and they barely win, or they heaven forbid get beat, it's not going to be as bad. It's one guy doing the wrong thing here and one guy doing the wrong thing there, and so he's got his work cut out for him. But I like his ability and what he's capable of doing. But now he's got to put it into practice. Well, one follow-up on that question, and then I'll ask you one more, and I'll let you get on with your day. I love the point you made about a familiarity with a quarterback in an offense. Baron Morton, I think, is in his 4th year at Texas Tech. I think, Josh Hoover obviously coming back to TCU. How advantageous is that for Sawyer Robertson at Baylor? Is that for these quarterbacks, as opposed to, I was talking before you came online here, Jackson Arnold is kind of like in a quarterback battle at Auburn, right? Caden Salter, they're not quite sure if he's going to start. Like, the transfer guys are not just parachuted right in because of what you're talking about.
Exactly right. And let's go back to 10,000 years ago in my day, right? Joe Montana, from the first day he walked into the league until the last day he left the league, played in the same system and had great success. Steve Young was at Tampa Bay. He goes to the 49ers, gets into the system, and has success. So is it the system or the player? Well, it's the system that gives the player an opportunity to succeed. Marino, same system through his whole career till the end when Jimmy Johnson came in. All of a sudden, the greatest passer in the history of the game now is throwing for 90 yards a game. What happened? Well, the system changed, right? The one that was just kind of an outlier during my day was Warren Moon. Warren Moon could go from system to system, and it just didn't matter, and I don't know how you do that. For me, some of us, it doesn't matter the system. You can go out and you can just play and not think. Others, we've got to know the system so we can implement it. And so, some guys will come in and have success, and you could probably stick them in anything, throw them out there in the street, and they're going to have great success. Other guys are more system guys. I don't think that you'd take a Tom Brady and switch systems and overnight have success. But you let him learn the system, and you better look out because he's going to put you in situations to have success. So, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat, but so we'll see. Time will tell about some of these things.
That is a great intel from former big time, real successful quarterback. Last question for you: what do you want your legacy to be? On football, on life, 100 years from now. Or 50 years from now, what do you want people to say about David Klinger?
Well, so I'm pastoring. I teach seminary. Where one of the things that I think that we all need to realize, this is going to sound so obvious, but I've observed that the death rate is 1 per person, right? we're all heading towards the grave, and I've never seen yet anyone laying on their deathbed saying, boy, I just wish I would have made a little more money. Or I wish I was a little more famous, right? So ask yourself, if you had a week to live, well, how would you spend that time? What's important to you? And then reorient your life to those things, and bring your daily schedule in line with what's really important and what really matters. And so I hope they say, oh, that was a man of character, uncompromising character, right? Bullheaded. One of my old professors, I'd ask him, I said, Doc, you seem to be dogmatic on that issue. He says, no, I'm bulldogmatic on that issue. And I love that, right? The truth is the truth, right is right, wrong is wrong. Honor, character, integrity. And it's non-negotiable. It is absolutely non-negotiable. And I saw that in Jack Pardee. It was poured into me. I got to see it in real life. And I hope that others see it in me, and then it encourages them to say, wait a second, if he can be like that, because that's what it did. That's what Jack Pardee and men like that in my life, it's what it's done for me. If they can be men of integrity, why can't I be a man of integrity? And a man of character.
David Klinger, man, just as cool in person as it was to watch you when I was a kid. Thank you very much for the time. Will you be at the game on Thursday, or will you be in Dallas at home?
I will be traveling, but I'll be watching.
All right, let's go. Thank you so much for the time.